Good morning. The Board of Education, under the direction of new CEO Forrest Claypool, has rescinded the one-year contract deal that we were about to close in the coming days. By rescinding their agreement, we find this to be disingenuous, disturbing, and destructive. This latest act is yet one more illustration of the continued breach of trust experienced with district officials over the last 5 years. Mr. Claypool is the latest sheriff who seems to want to believe it is his or her responsibility to ride into power and show the teachers and other school employees that he's going to dole out harsh and disrespectful treatment. This is unfortunate. The new CEO, who has apparently directed CPS not to honor the deferred payment pickup, will impose a 7% pay cut in an effort to force us into another strike. Whether or not flip-flop or breach of trust will lead to a work stoppage this school year will be decided by our members at the appropriate time. Governor Rauner's insistence that Chicago teachers take a 7% pay cut is short-sighted and seeks to punish workers who did nothing wrong. This pension pickup, as it's called, is not a perk. This is a deferred compensation agreement that has been a legal part of our labor agreements since the 1980s. This came about as part of negotiations when the district claimed back then that it had no money for raises and other supports for classrooms. Teachers do not receive Social Security. When we retire, we live only on our modest pensions. And that means all of our health care, housing, and other needs are dependent on this money, deferred compensation that we have invested in and set aside so that we can live. Withdrawing this one-year contract is simply wrong. This resets the clock. We are concerned because we were very close to finalizing something that would have given the city and school district a year to stabilize its finances and allow us time to collaborate on how best to get relief from Springfield and look at a series of revenue options. That rug was pulled out from under us, and the district has mischaracterized what led to their rescinding the offer, and why is beyond strange to me. They could have been the heroes in this. But instead, Sheriff Claypool has decided to just blow things up and show us how tough he can be. We are fighting for stronger schools, job protections, yes, because we are a union, and resources that will battle the stress and violence our students are experiencing in this city. We do not want 40 children in a classroom, more paperwork and testing that reduce instructional time. We have longer school days, but less time to actually educate children. This makes no sense. If Mr. Claypool and the mayor are telling city's public school educators to go on strike, then they should just come out and say it. Otherwise, we expect the board to honor its agreements and work with us to give our students the schools they deserve. I would like our attorney, our general counsel, and chief negotiator, Robert Block, to say something about negotiations, and then we'll take questions.
Well, unfortunately, we must now go back to the drawing board and start over again because Forrest Claypool has withdrawn from the agreement we were on the verge of reaching. We began negotiations last November 2014 over a new contract, and at the school district's request, we sidelined those negotiations specifically so we could reach agreement on an interim contract extension that CPS said that they wanted and were anxious to negotiate with us. Now they've withdrawn from that when we were on the verge of reaching an agreement for reasons only they know. And unfortunately, we will be going back to school without a contract for the first time in a very long time. So far, CPS has resisted our calls for a mediator. We're hopeful now that they will allow a mediator to enter these talks so we can resume negotiations over a main contract.
Any questions?
Karen, I just want to make sure we characterize it correctly. Are you saying that their proposals are strike worthy? You support a strike?
I'm saying that to take a 7% pay cut is strike-worthy, yes.
What's the next step then for all of you? When might you take that vote?
Well, we have a process to go through. We can take a strike vote anytime, so people forget about that. There's no set time to take a strike vote. But, we'd like to get some other place before we have to do any of this.
Why do you think they've given up on the 1-year deal?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure. I don't know what the vision is, but I think you'd have to ask them.
Do you think that they clearly want you guys to give up the 7% so they can get something from Springfield, whether it's equity on, the pension payments? I think in their calculus, they need to get something from you in order to win something in Springfield.
But they'd already gotten our agreement to take a pay freeze for that year. I mean, that's a big deal to our members. That is a huge deal, is a pay freeze. So what, wasn't enough blood? Is that what you're saying, Kate?
Well, that's clearly what they think. And also, in the agreement that you've passed out, are there healthcare concessions also in the deal that?
No, we had, healthcare wasn't, those are major, what do you call those things? The big ticket items. And those are things that usually get solved later in the process. And those are the things we would look at in a longer term agreement.
But you said in this letter that you sent, you said CPS is walking away from an agreement. You listed a bunch of things, and one of them was significant healthcare cost savings. So what is that?
Let me clarify that. We did agree that the Labor Management Cooperation Committee, which is a joint committee of union and school board representatives, would meet and achieve significant healthcare savings over the course of the next year, mostly through efficiencies, through better practices in the way we run our healthcare fund. There was no specific agreement on what those savings would be, but there was a joint commitment to achieve them.
Karen, did I understand you to say that there's some action that's going to happen which will raise the pension deduction from a teacher's paycheck up to the 9% without negotiation?
No, I don't think we can do that without negotiation.
Right.
I mean, that's still negotiable.
Okay.
Even the governor would like to get rid of all of them.
Although what the governor said yesterday was that the city, and he didn't say who in the city asked that basically to be removed as an item for collective bargaining, so they'd have to get a piece of legislation. Right? Isn't that how it would work?
Yeah, they have to have legislation.
Do you have an opinion as to whether, if the legislature did pass a law to require you guys to pick up the entire 7%, whether that would meet muster under the recent Supreme Court decision?
They're very different, Greg. They're very different. The picking up of the 7% is a negotiated piece. Okay, it's not the same as, your pension has changed. You can't get it anymore, or your COLA, whatever you came in with when you were working. I think those are two different pathways.
So you don't see any constitutional impediment there?
Right, the Supreme Court decision protected the pension benefit that had already been earned by retirees and participants with vested rights. This relates to who's going to pay the money to finance those promised benefits.
So if they wanted to legally, they could do this?
It's a mandatory subject of bargaining. And if the state removes that from the subject of bargaining, then it will no longer be. But until then, all matters related to wages, payment of contributions for insurance and for pension benefits are all long-term, have always been subjects of bargaining, and matters over which the union can exercise its economic rights, the right to strike.
Karen, why is it worth it to strike over the 7% pickup?
It's a good question. I mean, because it is a pay cut. 7% is huge. It's a huge difference between, I cannot tell you, it's like you keep saying pick up, again, like it's some favor, This would come out of our paycheck. So you're asking us to not only take a pay freeze, now you're asking us to take a 7% pay cut. That is not acceptable to our members. No one has agreed to that.
Madam President, but Mr. Claypool, the mayor, others have said that the union has to have some skin in the game as we try to solve the fiscal issue. Your reaction to that?
Well, we do have skin in the game. We have tons of skin in the game. And this whole notion that we can afford to give the same amount that the state is giving or the same amount that, and don't forget the taxpayer piece, but please don't forget that we all live in the city. So we will be subject as taxpayers to that tax increase also.
Has the mood, tension, whatever, has it shifted anything because of Forrest Claypool?
It's a good question.
He hasn't been at the table, so, I mean, Forrest hasn't shown up in bargaining, so.
But has, at this 7%, is that something new, or has this been talked about for some time and now we're just hearing it?
I'll be honest with you, Miriam, there's this whole ebb and flow of how things go, right? And most of the time, there has been no acrimony around it. But when we went into negotiations yesterday, clearly there had been a change, and that room was frozen when we walked in there. And I needed more than a fleece to deal with that chill on the room.
7%, if they say 7%, take it or leave it. Do you say it's a non-starter, strike worthy, not going to school? If it's the 7, if it comes to be the end-all be-all issue.
I can't answer that because we haven't had that conversation with our membership. See, again, I think you all.
Well, what would you recommend?
I wouldn't recommend a thing. I would recommend my members to read whatever it is that they're proposing to us. And we would break down, this is how we work. We break down, we have discussions about it, we prioritize things. And if they say this is absolutely unacceptable, that's where we're going. But there's some unions that'll take those concessionary demands, and then their members are mad about it, But that's not how we work. We have a very democratic process about how we negotiate. And I know that's very difficult for most people to understand.
Well, what say the group behind you about the 7%?
Karen, can you quantify the 7% in terms of how much salary, how much money would that cost your membership every year if you did have to pay that 7%?
Well, where's Kathleen? Back there somewhere.
Let me say this, the 7% is a double whammy because 7% of the teacher's pay or a PSRP's pay would be diverted towards paying the cost of those pension benefits. So they lose 7% off the top, but it has the secondary effect that the salary is now lower than it used to be. And the pension benefit is key to the salary. So the pension benefit itself also declines as a result of it.
So can you put a number on that?
And we can't come, Senator Kirk can.
Get some numbers, please, for us.
It's about $140 million a year, annual at 7%. The payroll for Chicago Public Schools teachers and administrators is roughly $2 billion a year. That's been stable and declining over the last several years. That cut would actually come on top of $100 million annually in cuts that have gone from the district or from teachers and staff to the district as a result of the 2011 raise that was rescinded unilaterally by the board. That costs $100 million annually that every year that teachers didn't have it because that was taken out of the base pay. And so by the time you add both that raise plus the $1.2 billion that was the pension holiday from 2011 through 2013, as well as hundreds of millions of dollars in cuts each year, the district has already, staff and teachers across the city have already given more than $2 billion back to the board over the last several years. This 7% cut on top of that would be an additional annual amount of about $140 million a year.
Does that sound like skin in the game to you?
For one teacher, what does that mean? For one teacher, an average teacher, what does that cut mean?
So if you're looking at let's say a teacher who's starting out, second year teacher makes about $55,000 a year, and I have to go check the salary schedule. You're looking at about $4,000.
Yes.
If the strike authorization vote were taken today, would the body have the internal capacity required to approve that?
No, I don't know. We don't do stuff in the summer because our members are on vacation, they're in school, they're doing a whole lot of other stuff. So I wouldn't even begin to try to have this put before the body right now.
And Counselor, can you elaborate for the rest of us here legally as far as the timetable that would have to play out as far as an authorization vote and when we can actually see a strike, if in fact we did see it?
Strike vote can be taken at any time.
Right. But the actual process of going on strike couldn't necessarily occur until well into the winter now, right?
We are required by the statute to fulfill the impasse resolution procedures. Those begin with mediation. We've been calling on CPS to begin mediation now for 8 months. We're hopeful that they will, now that they've withdrawn from the agreement they sought, that they will at least begin the mediation. Following mediation is a fact-finding process, recommendations of a fact finder, a cooling off period, and then the union would have the right to strike if its members had authorized one.
So how much time does that take?
Several months.
So is he accurate? It would be more like a winter job action if it occurred?
Whether there'll be a job action and when that comes will be up to the vote of the members and the House of Delegates. But the statutory processes will take us through into the winter, yes.
What's the impact of not having a contract in school service?
Yeah, this discussion yesterday. I think the uncertainty level makes things very difficult for people in general. It depends on what their paychecks are going to look like. They'll probably be significantly smaller because the board likes to use that kind of thing. So we don't have to do what we did before. We can do something different.
Should layoffs have to occur for teachers here before we reach another agreement? Do you feel there are sufficient protections in the current contract for any actions that might happen to your members?
You know, it's a great question, Juan, and it depends on where you fall. It depends on where you fall.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, it depends on where you are in seniority. It depends on where you are in your ratings. And it depends on where you are in terms of your relationships with your principals and what they've decided they wanted to focus on. So if you have a librarian and they really want an art teacher instead, the librarian's gone. You know, we're gonna bring in art. Or, you know, so it's always pitting people against one another, and that's problematic. I mean,
Can you, in the last time we had a press conference, you talked about the non-economic issues that you were working on. Does this agreement that you handed out, is the union satisfied with progress on grading and the evaluation and testing, or is there enough progress in here to satisfy those issues, the non-economics?
yes and no. One of the things that we're clear of, we don't want committees to, you know, put something off. I mean, we've had these joint board union committees to do certain things, and our members don't feel the impact of that. So we want something that's a little stronger than a committee to study, look at, and give consultation.
So which areas?
Well, one of the things that we have been working on really hard is the paperwork piece. And we actually put together a list of paperwork that we'd like to sit down with our members and with management and go through and see what's redundant and what isn't. Testing, we've been talking, we've made some really great strides on testing.
And are those reflected in this
I believe so.
agreement? What about teacher evaluation?
No, that's in there, but it wasn't. Again, it's not teacher evaluation, it's how the teacher evaluation is used.
And how did you
So I
want them
us
to use the
make sure-
evaluation?
Huh?
What would be the ideal way that you would want them to use those evaluations?
Well, the ideal way is to use the evaluations to get appropriate feedback, so you can do better. I always thought that's what evaluations were for, but they seem to be rather punitive and overlaid with paperwork. So even the principals are complaining about the evaluation system. You should talk to some of them. They can tell you it's onerous. So we'd like to find a way to make that better, and we'd like to find a way to make it so that people who have been effective and have been effective for years, all of a sudden are not just now.
We also wanted to talk about our progressive revenue options that we put forth that we would like the governor and the mayor to consider. And Kirk, could you kind of outline those for us?
I mean, there are a variety of options.
Would you just state your name?
Oh, sure.
Go to the mic, you have to actually go to the mic.
You have to go to the mic and you have to spell it.
Kurt Hilgendorf, KURTHILGENDORF,
Your title.
policy researcher. I think there are a variety of issues that we can do. The issue at the state level is that any action, we look at this in short-term and long-term actions, that there are actions that the city could take. It could do work immediately to address TIFs, to renegotiate toxic interest rate swaps, to look at options of addressing, for instance, a sales tax on luxury services. These are things that could be done quickly without state requirements. Instead, we get fines, fees, and nickel and diming local residents to try to address these issues. At the state level, you could look at financial transactions tax, the LaSalle Street tax. You could look at a graduated income tax. You could look at a whole variety of issues on revenue. And I think one of the pieces that's important is that if you look at the state of Minnesota, that has a very distinct and expansive graduated income tax system, not only do they have more revenue for services and schools in the state, but they're actually seeing better economic growth. And so Minnesota's taken a distinctly different position than the Warner administration, who specifically said, we're not taking Kansas's approach, and then at every opportunity puts forth Kansas's approach to revenue. And so in order to really address what is fundamentally a revenue issue, both the city and the state need to take progressive revenue actions to address those. And until that, we will continue to be in this problem. What the city has and what the school system has is an issue with compound interest. Until they get away from this compound interest issue, both with the unfunded liability on the pensions, a huge expansion in their debt, until you have a revenue stream that matches and grows with the obligations that you've taken on, we will continue to be in this period. And so this continues to be a revenue issue.
And the other piece to that, when Kurt was talking about looking at all these other options, the fact that they will pay, CPS will pay the banks their 100 cents on a dollar. Okay? They'll pay them back 100 cents on a dollar. What skin in the game do they have? So why can't they renegotiate those payments with banks? Those are the kinds of things that would make a huge difference and fairly quickly. Okay?
If you play by the rules, it would take several months to arrange a strike. Could the membership vote to go out sooner than that?
Yes, the membership could vote tomorrow. The notion of taking the strike vote has nothing to do with the other process. Again, because they could vote tomorrow to take a strike.
I'm curious to hear a little bit of your reaction to some of the governor's commentary in recent days and some of his calls on the city to work with him a little bit more publicly as far as potential legislative changes too.
I'm just going to say that I'm trying to be good, Lauren. All right? I'm trying to be good. So let me just say that today. And I don't really feel like talking about what he's doing, because what he's doing is campaigning still. He still hasn't governed, but he's still campaigning. And I think he'll have to get into the mode where he learns how to govern.
Karen, can I clarify this question about when a strike might occur, if it might occur? You said the membership could vote tomorrow. Your council said that statutorily the earliest we could actually go out is the winter.
Yes, those are
Chicago
two different things. So strike authorization
could come tomorrow.
could come tomorrow. There's nothing in the legislation that says when the strike can be voted on.
But the actual strike itself, if it occurred, couldn't happen until into the winter.
Right, well, yeah.
That's
what
because
it
of
said, late fall,
the
early.
bureaucratic and legislative requirements to get to that.
And you could
Just strike over
authorize
the
and
contract.
then unauthorize if you saw fit.
Well, I mean, if we come to an agreement, then there's no strike, right? So that's the whole point. And here's the deal, we will eventually land an agreement. It will happen, it will happen. So I think we need to look long range at how that's gonna work and short range, the benchmarks along the way.
When
Are
you
you
guys meeting
confident that
next?
you could defeat any legislation in Springfield that would try to impose this
No.
solution?
No, I'm not confident about anything when it comes to politics. I really not. There's too much money involved and too many people that have too many other interests. I mean, I would hope that our allies would come together and defeat something that hurts us. But no, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball either, so that would be nice though. Okay. One more?
When
One
are you
more,
guys
anyone
meeting
else?
next? When are you meeting next for negotiations?
It's a good question. We are scheduled for Thursdays, right? Yeah, because we need an answer back about the We're still gonna negotiate. We're not done,
So next Thursday you'll be meeting again.
most likely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.